Good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and we're here with another of our virtual events. And today we have our good friend, Lisa Jewell. She's going to be discussing her killer new book, The Night She Disappeared. Is that the British edition behind you there?
No, it just looks a strange color. It's
It
exactly the
does.
same edition that you've got, but for some reason it looks teal
A little
in
bit,
this light. Yeah, odd. No, it's exactly, look, if I get one closer.
Oh, yeah.
It still looks teal.
It
How
does.
strange.
Right.
Well,
Blimey.
exactly the same as yours.
It looks
Very
more.
strange.
It looks more like my jewelry, which I'm holding up.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is called Bisbee. It's called Bisbee turquoise, and it has a slightly green cast to it. It doesn't really show on the screen, so we're all in sync.
But mine looks incredibly blue in real life, but teal on my screen. I don't know.
Lisa's been kind enough to sign a batch of books, and we
Right.
have some left. I'll go ahead and put a link in the comments field. And Barbara's tuning in from her home office. And Lisa, have you sent Paul Weller his copy yet?
Oh, I bet you he doesn't even read thrillers. I bet you he doesn't. But no, I haven't. Maybe I'm waiting to cross paths with him again. I can give it to him in person.
I saw that little snap you took at was it a restaurant or someplace? Yeah.
It was a restaurant. I was doing a ladies who lunch with two fellow female authors. And one of them said, look over there, it's Paul Weller. And I honestly, I nearly fell apart at the seams. It was one of the most exciting things that's ever happened to me. And then I couldn't speak for the rest of the meal because all I could think was Paul Weller sitting over there. Paul
He's
Weller's
a musician, Barbara. Yeah.
He was he was very big in the 70s and 80s.
The Jam and everything.
In the Jam and everything. Yeah, he's a bit of a British national darling, I would say. He's very loved over here.
At any rate, yeah. Let me hand
a little sidebar there, right?
Yeah, a little
sidebar.
Yeah. But I'll be monitoring the Facebook comments field. If you have any questions for Lisa, go ahead and put them in, and I will be happy to ask them. And I'm going to be hanging out on screen today with you, Barbara, just to throw in some questions of my own. So. Over to
That's
you.
Wonderful news, Patrick. Thank you very much. Well, the sad part of today is that Lisa's not here, which was our original plan. But the good part is that thanks to Zoom, we can still spend time with her. She's in London and I'm in Scottsdale, and Patrick's at the Poison Pen. So all is not lost. And I'm very pleased that we can do this. So I did a little research and I realized in talking to Lisa, I've never really delved into her background. It's kind of like when we meet authors, it's like Athena springing full form from the head of Zeus. So we never really think about their gestation. But here's one thing I learned about Lisa, which I had no idea were true. After she left school, she spent 2 years at Barnett College doing an arts foundation course, and then 2 years at Epsom School of Art and Design studying fashion illustration and communication. She worked for the fashion chain Warehouse for 3 years as a PR assistant, and then for Thomas Pink, the German Street Shirt Company, for 4 years, and started her first novel, Ralph's Party, for a bet in 1996. Well, I should have known about the fashion part because you always look so glamorous in your characters. And in The Night She Disappeared, obviously, you know, how people look, how they present themselves and all is important. So did you find that working in fashion, you know, has helped shape your books?
I wouldn't say that. I would just say that I've been interested in clothes from a very young age and certainly through my teenage years. And that's probably what informed my choices that ended up with me studying fashion for a short while and then working in the fashion industry. I was already interested in clothes. But yeah, I find people have asked me that before about having a background in fashion and the fact that I describe people's appearances quite well. But I actually think that any good novelist can describe someone's appearance well. I don't necessarily think you need to have a background in fashion or an understanding of fashion. You just need to be able to describe what someone's wearing and get it on the page. So yeah, I don't know how formative it was for me as a writer.
Well, I think it infuses your books with a certain I hate to use this word speaking to a British author, a certain class, that, you know, because certainly in the night she disappeared, you have some people, you have different classes involved in it. And, you know, presentation, we've been watching Foyle's War all over again out of, you know, nostalgia and whatever it is. And I'm really interested in how they dressed people for the war, you know, to make it feel authentic. But you can definitely tell the difference between, like, you know, the people in the country house where maybe a murder has occurred and, you know, the guy working down at the forge at the blacksmith shop or whatever.
But there is a moment in the book where Scarlet, who's the posh girl who lives in the mansion out in the countryside, is sitting on the bus with Tallulah, who's just a village girl, and she says, "I like your trainers," and I don't know what you call the sneakers, and Tallulah says they were 1999 from New Look, which means something over here in the UK, and it is kind of a class thing. I don't know if that would translate so well to a US readership. I don't know if that would mean the same thing.
Well, I don't know that the brand would, but I think that the, you know, what you're actually,
1999,
right. I mean, trainers is a word that always trips us all up because we
yeah,
tend
well,
to
there's
call
lots of them.
Yeah, gym shoes, you know, or tennis shoes or something. But anybody who reads British fiction has learned some of the lingo, so to speak, and vice versa. But although I'm not sure they're really a badge of fashion, because it's amazing to me that people of all income brackets will spend upwards of $200, you know, for a really flash pair of trainers. So in a way, it's almost reverse snobbery. But
Yes, maybe that wasn't such a good example to use of the class difference between the characters in the book, because you're right, yes, that doesn't really sort of necessarily denote someone's bank balance, does it? How much their trainers cost. But yeah, no, there is an interesting contrast in the book with these two girls who are the same age, Scarlet and Tallulah, and one of them, Tallulah, is from this very nurturing, cosseted, kind of quiet, small family where nothing ever happens, but she knows she's loved. And then there's Scarlet, who's lives in this crazy mansion on the outskirts of the village, this huge rambling house that's been sort of the first part of the house was built in the 1600s, and then it's been extended over the years, so it's got a Georgian bit, Victorian bit, now it's got a big glass box on the back, and she kind of is just left to her own devices there. Her parents are very, very rarely there, and she's sort of neglected in a weird way, even though she's got everything that a girl could possibly want. She doesn't have that sort of that warm hug of a family unit around her to make her feel valuable.
Years ago, there was a really fabulous British mystery written, and it was a debut novel, but kind of the thesis behind it was how many children of posh families were left to be raised by the servants, I mean, this was, you know, a while back, a governess who had no actual authority. So the kids were necessarily.
Oh yeah, there's some very damaged children from that generation, that Victorian generation, and that leaked through into, you know, even probably my parents had been affected by Victorian parenting in that way. But yes, so for upper class children of that time, they lived on a different floor of the house to their. It's like in Peter Pan. They lived on a different floor of the house to their parents, and sort of very rarely saw them, or carted off to boarding school at the age of 6 years old and what have you. So yes, a lot of damage was done in those generations, in those years, but it's not like that anymore. I think those days.
There was a built-in sense of entitlement to go along with the neglect, and I think that did produce some really horrible people.
And that is the story of, I guess, Scarlet and her family, is that privilege and that entitlement, which also, as you say, involves a certain amount of neglect and brings forth people who are not necessarily nice or kind or decent.
They all come
damaged people, yes.
They
And
come
that's the
from
thing,
Dark
Tallulah
Place.
is not damaged. Yes. Ah, and Dark Place is in fact the name of the house where Scarlet lives. It was called Dark Place because it burnt down in the 1600s, and was left just with a circle of dark ash around its perimeter. So the people in the village called it the Dark Place. Yes, that's why it's called that.
Well, you have various point of view characters here. We have Tallulah, we have Tallulah's mother, we have Scarlet, we have Scarlet's ghastly mother. But Sophie is, I think, a really fascinating character. And I love the idea that she writes the Little Hither Green Detective Agency. So
Yeah.
do we surmise that those are kind of cozies, a sort of MC Beaton, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I have to be completely honest and say I've never read any cozy crime. I didn't even know it was a genre. I'd never heard of it until I was at a book fair in Denmark a few years ago, and it's massive over there in Scandinavia, cozy crime genre. And she was just showing me around a bookshop, this huge section, which just was cozy crime. And she's like, well, this guy just writes about owls, and this guy just writes about dogs, and this guy just writes about flowers, and it was just, yeah, it was, I kind of, yeah, I had no idea that this genre existed. So it was quite fun for me to create this fictional character who writes a fictional series of cozy crime novels set in this fictional detective agency called the Little Hither Green Detective Agency. Yeah, it was a fun thing to do.
So what's Hither Green? Is it a village?
No, Hither Green. See, this is because obviously London was originally just dozens of villages that all connected with each other, and became this huge sprawling urban mass. But yeah, Hither Green would have at one point in history have been a gorgeous little village, on the sort of 3 miles away from the centre of London, but is now just part of the urban sprawl. And I've had quite a few people who live in Hither Green write to me and say, you make it sound really nice. It's not like that. I said, I know it's not like that. It's kind of supposed to be a bit of a joke. It's just like, yeah, no, Hither Green is quite a rough area of southeast London, and not as pretty as the name suggests. Unlike Upfield Common, my fictional village, in The Night She Disappeared, which is stunning, which is exactly what you would imagine a beautiful English country village to look like. And it was actually, I was driving 6 years ago. We were talking about your puppies earlier. Driving 6 years ago down to the breeders to collect our puppy. And we drove through this village, and I just thought, this is ridiculous. And I noticed that there was a boarding school in this village. I thought, imagine going to school in a place this stunning, this perfect, weeping willows, a village pond, the white ducks floating across the surface, perfect gastro pub over there. And everything, every single brick on every single house was clean, and just, it looked like a film set. And yeah, I don't remember thinking at the time I'd like to write a book set here, but it just got sort of buried away somewhere in the back of my head. And so when I wanted to write a book set in a commuter belt village, as in this is a village that's close enough that you could live there but still go to London to work every day, it just sort of popped to the surface. And yeah, that was my dream village.
It made me think of Upper and Lower Slaughter, which I can remember the first time I went there, and I thought,
Yeah.
how can it be that these little villages,
Yeah.
are actually places where people live, and they're not some sort of model village like in Scandinavia.
Exactly. That was the beauty of it, is this, I drove through for all of 30 seconds, clocked this boarding school, just thought, wow. But then writing a book set there gave me that chance to sort of imagine the lives of people who actually do live in a village like that. And it's not all just sort of, taking the dog for a walk and saying hello to your friendly neighbors. There's dark stuff going on as well. Obviously, there's dark stuff going on everywhere, which is the beauty of writing in the thriller genre, is it's all out there, and it can be anywhere. It could be in any corner of any country, anywhere in the world, the dark stuff. And it's fun from an author's point of view to just sort of almost stick a pin in a map and say, okay, I'm going to have my dark stuff happen here. But even more fun when you do it somewhere so idyllic, so picture postcard perfect. Yes, it's quite sort of subversive in a way.
It sounds great. I don't think I've been to Rottingdean for 35 years, but I do remember there's a particularly posh girls' school. And I seem to remember that it's a really stunning building, but I don't remember that much about the village.
Yeah, no, my brother-in-law lives near Rottingdean, and I know there is it Rodine? Did I just make that up? There is a very posh girls' boarding school. Yes, in that area of the woods.
So that's what I was envisioning when I was reading your book, you know, and again, you have to wonder what it would be like, you know, especially from girls who might not have grown up in a place like that or at that level. It might be interesting. Does a school like this, because this is where your author's partner goes to take a new position. Do they have scholarship girls at a school like that?
No, so I was originally going to have it be an absolutely classic Enid Blyton style British boarding school from 13 to 18 years old. And then I decided that that was going to be too sprawling for what I had in mind. I wanted something much more particular. So it's actually what you would, I don't know if you would use this phrase in America, crammer college. So what it actually is, all right, so it's where you go if you've failed your exams and you just want to retake them in a year. So this is for kids who, so this is for 16 to 19-year-olds. So it's a place where parents with lots of money, no time and no patience, who've just had enough of their kids flunking everything at all the other posh and expensive schools they've been sending them to, think, that's it, I've had enough of this. You're failing, you're seeing too much of your friends, you're out smoking weed, whatever it is, you're going, I'm going to lock you in this place for 3 years and you're going to take your exams and you're going to pass them there. So it's that sort of boarding school, because I wanted it to be older children and I want it to be smaller and more manageable and not about young children. So yeah, it's not that sort of sprawling Rodine type of thing. It's much more compact.
There's a genre that I featured in our September book news called Dark Academia. And your book isn't at all like that. But I had to think about the idea that a campus can really take the place of an Agatha Christie country house. And then I was thinking, I mean, the obvious one, of course, is Rebecca or something like that. But then there have been more recent ones. But, you know, it also made me realize that The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco actually took the monastery and, you know, made it a similar thing. I mean, the monastery becomes the campus becomes the close country house circle. It's an amazingly versatile form.
Yeah, and that was actually the starting point for the book, was every single one of my books, because I don't come to a book with a plot in mind or a big theme in mind or a big question that I want to answer. I come to my books with very, very shadowy and vague ideas about what it is I might want to do. And with this one, it was somebody said the word boarding school. And as they said the words boarding school, I thought, I want to write a book set in a boarding school. That would be amazing. And I had this kind of idea of it being slightly sort of the secret history kind of homage thing. And yeah, so that was the starting point. And I imagined this boarding school out in the countryside. And then, of course, immediately remembered the one that I'd driven past and thought that will be the one that I write about. And the only thing I knew about this boarding school was that someone was going to find something buried in the grounds of it that was going to refer back to a cold case or a previous crime that hadn't been solved. So yeah, that was the basis of the whole thing, was this idea of something terrible happening in a boarding school. As it happened, as I wrote the book, and I write very organically, and I don't plan, and I don't plot, and I don't have notes. I found the story leaking out of the boarding school. I'd intended it to be quite claustrophobic and intense, like a crucible sort of thing, but it leaked out and I couldn't help myself from just kind of exploring the village and finding out where other people lived. And then we ended up at Scarlet's house across the woods, this amazing house, this huge mansion across the woods. And then I found that, you know, even going into the town a mile down the road with the big a community college where Tallulah and Scarlet both study. So yeah, it didn't turn out quite as claustrophobic and neat as I'd imagined it would at the beginning, but it was still, that was the basis of it.
You really obviously like that whole closed structure. And unfortunately, we can't talk about the end because of spoilers, but Lisa even drags in yet another version of a very closed structure when we get to the end of the book. So I can see it kind of overtook you.
Yes, it did, and we can't talk about that. So
no, sadly not. But anyway, it's there. So you alert readers, you could actually catalog how many instances of a sort of country house we wind up with.
Yes,
right.
Indeed.
So Patrick, what would you like to ask?
I would like to ask a number of things. I mean, one of the things that was central to the book anyway for me was, of course, Kim as a character, a 39-year-old. She finds herself as a grandmother at 39. I thought she was a great character, and so much of the heart of the book, for me anyway, was her own sense of heartbreak. The mother-daughter relationship there. Did you start? And also, I wanted to ask you structurally how you juggled the dual timelines. How did that all work out?
Well, I guess there were two things I knew. I knew that someone was going to arrive at this boarding school and find something buried in the grounds. And I knew that whatever they found buried in the grounds was going to relate to a crime, which might have been a murder, but may not have been a murder. So I knew that I would have to go somewhere and meet someone who had something to do with a crime. And I can't remember where Kim came from, but she came to me very suddenly and very fully formed. And I just saw her sitting with her grandchild on her lap, sort of wondering where her daughter was and when she was going to come home. So those two storylines. So Sophie in the present day, who is the partner, as we mentioned, of Sean, who's the new head teacher at this boarding school, finding this, what she actually finds is a cardboard sign nailed to a fence just outside the head teacher's cottage with the words "dig here" scrawled on it. So her storyline was, it was clear what her function was. She was going to be my detective and find out what on earth this thing was that she'd uncovered from the grounds of the boarding school and what it meant. And then I knew that I would have Kim, this mother, this confused and desperate mother who's been told that her child must have run away from home because she couldn't deal with the responsibility of being a teenage mother. And she knows that's not true. She knows how much her daughter adored her son and how ready she was to take full responsibility for him. So and because I don't write each one and then chop it up, I write them in the order in which you read them. They just sort of bounced off each other. It was just like, well, Kim's just discovered this about Scarlet, and now Sophie will discover this about Scarlet too, and then the two things will inform each other. So for me, it's the easy way of writing, because the characters are all telling me things as they go. And then Tallulah came in quite late. I wasn't going to write Tallulah's point of view. I was just going to use Kim and Sophie to tell the story, but I suddenly realized about 50 pages in that we really needed to know who Tallulah was, what secrets she might be hiding, and how on earth she ended up at a pool party at this mansion in the middle of the countryside with this girl that her mother had never even heard of until the day that Tallulah goes missing. She'd never heard of Scarlet. So yeah, then that became the sort of backstory that sort of lay underneath the top story.
Right. And then we learn, that Tallulah, she was stressed out, she was dealing with the college workload. Her boyfriend might be a little controlling.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things we learned that we didn't initially know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's what I had to learn, because I didn't know anything about her. All I knew was that she'd gone out to the pub and not come home. That was all I knew about Tallulah, which is why I had to write her to because I would not be able to feed any of her into the other two storylines if I didn't know the truth about who she really was, what she really wanted, what her desires were, what her fears were, what she was actually doing for that year that led up to her disappearance, and how she knew Scarlet. I didn't know how she knew Scarlet, so I needed her to tell me.
Any of your family members help out as far as inspiration for some of the characters, or?
Not in this one. I live with my two teenage daughters, and if you've read enough of my books, you'll know I'm slightly obsessed with writing about teenagers. I love writing about teenagers, and I must say it is very helpful living with. I mean, most of what I write about teenagers comes from my own memories of being a teenager myself. I feel a very deep connection with my teenage self even now. I feel very fond of my teenage self. In fact, just a strange person I was. But actually, yes, living with teenagers is also very helpful because I'm writing about, obviously, modern contemporary teenagers who talk in a different way and think in a different way and communicate in a different way. So yes, I do definitely use them for inspiration.
I was interested in naming her Tallulah, which is not a name I normally associate with British. I just don't think of it as a particularly British name. Am I wrong?
I think you're wrong, yes. I think if you were to come and walk down the corridor of a British secondary school and ask the girls what their names were, you'd be surprised there's no Amandas or Sarahs, or, you know, they're all called the same names that they're called in America. It's just, you know, mothers these days were brought up watching American TV shows. So we're all being informed by the same sort of popular culture. So yeah, I think there's lots of correlation between popular girls' and boys' names between our two countries now, much more so than they used to be.
I thought Tallulah and Scarlet were both really interesting names. And, you know, I found them distinctive, and each of them illuminated some of the character, I thought. So did you name them before you got to know them, or did you get to know them and then you named them?
I named them on the spot, on the minute I started writing them, I named them. And that's not always the case. It's nearly always the case. I nearly always have exactly the right name for my characters the minute they come to me. But sometimes I struggle a bit to find the right name. But I would say 9 times out of 10, I know exactly what they're called as I start writing them. And that was certainly the case with those two. Yeah, they were just there, ready to go.
That's really fascinating, because we've had a lot of discussions with authors about how difficult it is to name characters or to find the right names and so forth. So
yeah,
interesting that they come to you like that.
I'm not an overthinker. I'm not. I'm the sort of person in a restaurant, I will open the menu, I will skim it, I will see something, I'll think I'll eat that, I'll shut my menu while everybody else is still there staring at their menus, discussing everything. It's like, no, I know what I want, and that's what I want, and I don't want to look at the menu, because if I keep looking at the menu, I'm going to get confused. And I'm the same when I make choices when I'm writing. It's just like, if I overthink it, if I spend too long thinking of a name for a character, I've wasted a load of time thinking of a name for a character which I could have used just to write some more words and get the book a bit longer.
Well, at our next dinner here in Scottsdale, I'm not inviting my husband because he could take half an hour to, and even when the waiter finally is standing there, pen in hand, he's still dithering.
I can't bear it. It's just like, listen to your head. What does your head say? Just look at the menu, look at the thing that jumps out at you, and that would clearly be the thing that you want. You don't need to keep thinking about it and talking about it and keeping that poor waiter standing there. He's got a job to do. He's got other customers to serve. He doesn't want to stand here and watch you decide.
You ever had the
ever going to mix the two of you? It would be fatal.
Yeah, really.
I've had to learn to bite my tongue over the years. You know, we're all going order. You know, but I think in his case, it's not that he can't make up his mind that he would like to order more than one thing, and so it's actually functioning more than indecisiveness. But
yeah, well, that's life. Yes.
Yep. So Patrick, sorry, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, you know, it's funny. It sounds like you're very intuitive and you know exactly, well, you arrive at the name and you stick with it. have you ever had the experience of you know, saying, you know what, she's not an Amy, she's a Scarlet, and doing a global search and replace?
I have in earlier books. I stick to my guns much more keenly now. I'm much more sort of confident, I think, in my choices. I certainly have done that with past books. But here's an interesting thing about The Night She Disappeared. So I wrote the whole book last year and delivered it to my editor here in the UK, and she read it. And at that time, Tallulah's boyfriend was called Thomas. They were called Thomas and Tallulah. That was the name of the couple. And she said to me, Thomas is a nice boy's name. It doesn't suit him. You need something harder. You need something stronger. And so, in fact, I immediately said, well, what about Zach? So, yeah. So then I did have to do search and replace to turn all the Thomases into Zachs. And I think she was right. I think Zach is a better name for him. I think he feels like more of a Zach and less of a Thomas. I was trying to be unobvious because he is quite a dark and controlling and slightly violent character. I thought I'd give him a soft name just to, you know, be different.
It's so
To
interesting.
mislead us is what you're really saying. Isn't it interesting the emotional freight that we attach to names, and each of us, I think, feels differently. I mean, I'm not going to say them aloud for fear of offending anybody, but there are several names that I have an almost automatic aversion to, or some, you know, negative emotion that I attach to them. And I think most people are like that for whatever life experience that, you know, causes us to feel that way.
Yeah, no, I do. I think everybody has those names that they think, oh, I've never met one of those that I like.
So Sophie, in a way, this is kind of a late coming of age story for Sophie. I mean, Sophie, you know, has been living in London. She's been writing this very, I guess, well selling, at least enough to keep her going, detective agency series on the cozy side. And then she's had to make some choices. Her partner has taken up this job as a headmaster, but he's not done it. He's not done it because he's in love with the job. He's done it because he needs an income rise, because his ex-wife is moving their two children to a much more expensive school. So he needs to make more money to pay his part of the fees. Is that?
Yeah, well, she's actually moving them from a state school, as in a free government funded school, to a private school, which is something that a lot of parents do in this country. They suddenly freak out, think, no, my precious babies, they're not going to get everything they need in this wonderful state funded. We have really good schools over here, government funded schools, really, really good ones. But some parents freak out and just think, no. Anyway, so this is what Sean's ex-wife has done. He's had a freak out, and he's got twins, and she's put them into a private school, which is, and expecting him to contribute. And he is at the time teaching in a state school. So he was on a state salary, which is not particularly high for teachers, as we know. So yeah, he takes the job at this posh boarding school, not out of any desire to be the head teacher at a posh boarding school, but in order to finance his children's education. So yeah, that's why he's there.
So Sophie makes leaves her London life and moves to this place in this school for him, who is not necessarily in love with this job, as we've just established. And I find it, I like the way that you sum up what happens to her in the end, which we won't discuss. But I did think in a way it was kind of a mid-30s. Is that what she is?
Yeah, she's just about to turn 34, I think, or she's about to turn 36. Anyway, she's at that classic age, or where you would make her. So the thing is, they've only been together for 6 months, and he tells her quite early on in their relationship that he's got this job starting in September at this school out in the countryside. And at first, she doesn't think anything of it, because she's just like, well, he's just my new boyfriend. It doesn't matter. And then as the months and the weeks go by, and it gets closer and closer to him leaving London and going to this new job in the countryside, she does that sort of 30-something freak out of like, this could be it. This could be my last chance. I really should just abandon everything and follow him out there and worry about it when I get there, which is basically what she does for the duration of the novel. Is just like, what have I done? What have I done? What am I doing here? Yeah, so it's just a sort of slow kind of voyage of realization for her that she kind of made a slightly hasty choice there, but probably a choice that was worth making.
One of
Well,
the nice
I think, if it causes her to reflect on her life and what she really values, it is a choice
Yeah,
well worth
exactly.
making, because she's kind of lazing along, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Really, it's only when you're forced to make a difficult choice that the things that matter to you the most become that apparent.
That's exactly correct, and that is her precise story arc in this novel.
I was just going to say, one of the nice surprises was the relationship that develops between her and Kim.
Yes, and I always knew that that was going to happen. I always knew that obviously the woman who has stumbled upon a clue that might lead to, the solving of this old mystery would clearly have to come together with the mother left behind. And it happened. It actually ended up happening quite a lot later in the novel than I was expecting it to happen. So I was so relieved when they finally did, when they did kind of hook up and get together. And then Kim kind of keeps Sophie at arm's length a little bit because she's not sure of her motivations. And then it was just, they finally clicked, and then they became quite the team, quite the crime-solving team. And it was fun. It was fun to sort of picture them with their heads bowed over the laptop together, researching things and trying to get there before the hapless police. I always have to make my detectives the hapless, my police officers hapless, because if they were too good, then my pretend detectives wouldn't get to do their role in the book, which is to find out what's going on, find out the truth. So they're always a bit rubbish, my police.
Well, the title suggests The Night She Disappeared, that it's a quick action, kind of a story. But in point of fact, Tallulah's story, it goes on for a very long time.
I assume you mean in a time-wise or across? Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes. Well, that was, as I said, that was something I introduced into the story because I knew I needed to write it in order to understand what had really happened. But yeah, I mean, it's a good chunky old book, and quite a lot of people have said it's a slow burn. And I guess some people like a slow burn, some people don't like a slow burn, but and quite a few of my books start off with a slow burn, and some people get gripped the minute they start reading, even though it's slow. They already know it's worth hanging on. And some people don't get there until halfway through, and then they sort of slot in and think, okay, right, I know why I'm here now. This is let's just keep going. But it's a big old book. It's not a wham bam, girl goes missing, crime solved. There's an awful lot of layers and unpeeling of layers and backstory and back and forth and what have you to get to the end.
You can't develop the characters and all if you made it a really rapid action book. I don't think slow burn is a pejorative. I think different stories require different, time frames.
Some people think slow burn is a bad thing. I've seen quite a lot of that, particularly in relation to this book, actually. I don't normally like a slow burn book, or this was a bit of a slow burner for me. In the very, very few negative things that I've heard, that has been the criticism, that it's too slow to get going. But most people don't find that at all. Most people who've read it have been just sort of invested from page one, and really happy just to go at the pace that the story goes to get to the end and find out what really happened.
But you've chosen to write different books. You're not writing a series. You're not, repeating key elements book after book. And so, your books are going to be different. And some stories take a long time to develop and some are faster, but you can't write for everybody. No. You have to write what the story demands.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And in fact, I gave it to my editor here in the UK and I said, it's really, really long. You can cut loads out if you like. And she finished reading it. She said, no, I don't, it's as it should be. I'm not going to cut anything out. It's as it should be. It's the size it should be. So I thought, okay, you say so.
Come on,
I'll go along with
it's
you.
398 pages as compared to a sort of ordinary 320. I
Yeah.
mean, it's really not that much longer. And you
Okay.
say,
All
I
right.
mean,
I feel
you know,
reassured. I feel reassured. Thank you. My book
no,
is not too long.
absolutely. I mean, I thought that was one of the charms of the book, is that we weren't being,
Right.
ripped through
Yeah.
it like we are in, I mean, some of the big military thrillers go on and they're fast, but they go on much longer than this book. I mean,
Yeah, the books my dad used to take on holiday that were like this thick. But yes, he'd be flipping through the pages of those things. So yeah, I guess.
now, one thing we've noticed in the pandemic is people are actually reading things like War and Peace and Moby Dick. So they're kind of prepped for all of this. Patrick, did you
Yeah.
think it was a slow burn? I never even occurred to me.
Not at all. And I have kind of the opposite feeling, where I get kind of irritated if I feel like it's like pulling me along to, like I'm not the biggest, I don't know. I like some character depth, and that's, I didn't feel it was a slow burn. I thought it
Good.
very well.
Thank you.
And it
Thank
had a
you.
lot of emotional heft, But I do have a question here from Ariel, and she says, I'd love to hear more from Lisa about motherhood and how she represents it in all of her books.
That's a big question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, I don't know. I'm a very particular sort of mother in the real world. I don't really know how to answer that. I just know that I write about all peoples. I write about Sophie, who's got no children, but has her boyfriend's children that she has to take care of every now and then. Then I write about Kim, who has two children who are the center of her universe. And then I write about Zach's mother, whose name is Megs, who has got 5 children and doesn't appear to care about any of them, particularly not her youngest one, Zach, the son, and isn't even terribly fussed about the fact that he's disappeared, thinks he's just gone off to have a fun life somewhere. And then you've got Scarlet's mother, whose name also escapes me, who is a narcissist and actively sort of manipulates her daughter's life to try and make her daughter feel bad about herself. So there's all sorts of ways about writing about being a mother. And I'm certainly not only feeding my own feelings about motherhood and my own feelings about my children and my own feelings about parenting into the characters and the family dynamics that I write on the page. It's just I want to write about all sorts of mothers, bad mothers, good mothers, strict mothers, liberal mothers, young mothers, old mothers, all the mothers. So yeah, it doesn't really come from me, that at all. It comes from the whole world.
Right. There's a great line early on with Megs when Kim calls her, and it's something about how she wasn't in the mood to be worried or something like that.
Yes, yeah.
Couldn't be arsed.
She can be asked to be worried, exactly. So yeah, Kim is starting to feel really anxious about the fact that Zach and Tallulah have now been missing for 12 hours, and comes to see Megs, who is Zach's mother, who also lives in the village, to say, look, I'm really worried the kids aren't back. And Megs it's a hot summer day and she's out in the garden with her husband sunbathing, and just had not signed up for a Saturday spent worrying about her son. That was not in the diary. Diary was Saturday, sit in the garden with my husband and sunbathe, and just can't click her head over into thinking, actually, no, I need to be on, concerned about this and doing something about this. So yeah, she's a strangely heartless woman, but in a way, I feel bad about Megs because unlike Scarlet's mother, who kind of informs the person that Scarlet was and had to be that sort of person, Megs, if I'd made her too nice and care too much about Zach disappearing, she would have then become quite central to the narrative, and she would have been much more a part of Kim's experience of having a missing child. And I didn't want her there. I didn't want her there. I wanted him to get on with it by herself. I didn't want Megs to be part of it, so I had to do this awful personality thing to Megs. And I'm not even sure I've ever met a mother quite as uncaring and sort of cold as Megs is in that, but she sort of had to be, unfortunately.
Have you been watching Line of Duty, which is a British policing import that has been very popular?
Yes, you're not allowed to live in the UK if you don't watch Line of Duty.
Well, do you remember the perfectly appalling mother in the first season, which is all I've watched, the ghastly little boy running around on his bicycle who, you know, you wished would take a bullet. But honestly, his mother is just, she's not like Meg. I mean, she's completely indifferent to him.
Yeah, I don't remember it. It's been so long since I saw the first season. It's been years.
I'm just horrified by her. And, you know, they live in a sort of project and the mother is either, I don't know, drunk or stoned or, you know, whatever it all is. Meg is not.
No, she's got no
that
excuse.
sort of. Yeah, I mean, she's not, you know, she's not an addict or, you know, whatever it is. I think she's just genuinely indifferent.
Indifferent, exactly. What an awful thing for a mother to be, kind of.
Especially a mother of 5, you know. I imagine by the time it filtered down to Zach as the younger one, it was particularly that way. Although maybe she was always that way, even with the first one.
Yeah, yes. Well, we didn't get too deep into her, so I guess we will never know what it was like for her other children, but we can certainly see how kind of cold it was for Zach.
So the arresting, you know, hook for this book when people are talking about it is coming across the sign that says dig here. So is that an entirely you creation, or did you run across anything like that?
No, it's just a thing that appeared in my head when I had this idea about writing a murder mystery set in a boarding school. I just saw it in my head, this sign pinned to a fence with dig here written on it. And then I had to kind of work out what it was pointing at and who was going to dig it up and what they were going to do with what they found. And, you know, I had originally thought it would be human remains, but that just didn't. I just decided that if I'd made it human remains at that point, right at the beginning of the book, so it's definitely not a spoiler, that would be kind of fixing it in place that someone was dead, and I wasn't sure at that point whether someone was dead or not, so I left it a bit more sort of kind of nebulous, a thing that could be anything or could be nothing or could be everything. So this object appears from the earth, and it's that object led the story itself, because when it appeared I still didn't know what it was for or what function it was performing in the narrative, so I had to find a job for it, which then informed lots of other things.
Well, it's certainly arresting, and you know, the natural tendency is in fact to think that you're going to find human remains, and whether we do or not, we're not going to say. But
well, we can, because it's right in the second chapter, so it's fine.
Oh, okay, so
it's fine, or the third chapter, but you can say it's not human remains, but let's not say what it was.
No,
although the clue is on the cover of the book.
That's very true. I think I just thought it was a wonderful device. You know, I mean, it really is one of those things that stops you in your tracks. You know, dig here in the context of what you believe is a crime novel is it's always going to be, you know, kind of like bang. All right. Did you feel that way, Patrick, when you saw it?
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like it would be fun to have kind of like a map of the Maple grounds. You know,
I did wonder, because I've had maps in previous books, and they've always been my UK editor's idea. She's always said, I think we should have a map in this one. And I was wondering with this one if she might say we should have a map in this one. In fact, Paula Hawkins' new one's got a map in it. Have you seen Paula Hawkins' new one?
Yeah.
The Slow Fire Burning. That she's got a map, and I was like, oh, maybe I should have had a map. It would have been good. I think I would have quite liked it.
I really like maps, and I find I do think it helps ground you in the story. You know, if you can kind of get a visual, so to speak, of what's going on. I know there are various schools of thought about maps, but I always come down on the plus side of them. I think they're particularly good for historicals. But I also think they work really well in this kind of closed structure thing, when you can pinpoint, where the particular points of interest are, and then kind
Yeah,
of ricochet
absolutely.
around them.
Yeah. Family trees are also fun in books.
Yeah.
When
Yeah,
you've got a lot of spread out characters, it's always nice to have something to refer back to. Yeah, things like that are always fun.
I like them. I'm not crazy about, a whole persona drama, the dramatic persona or whatever it is. I'm not crazy about listing all the characters and who they belong to and what their functions are, but I agree with you that a visual, like a family tree, is a lot of fun to see. Patrick, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yeah, there are a couple more. There are a number of viewers who really enjoy your books on audio, and they're wondering if you have input into the readers and so forth, and if you like them.
I never used to have any input. And in fact, the audiobook just used to be a sort of a little sideline, a little thing that happened, and you'd get this sort of packet of CDs in the post, and they'd say, "Here's your audiobook," and there'd be an actor's name on the artwork, and you think, well, I don't know who that is, but that's fine. And they've just become bigger and bigger and bigger, and then certainly during lockdown they just became huge. And so there was this sort of magical thing that happened during lockdown, that there were all these working actors locked in their houses, who couldn't get on the stage and couldn't get onto film sets. So audio studios and publishers started approaching actors and saying, would you like to read a book? You can do it at home. So publishers started becoming a bit braver about who to approach. And so for this one, for the audiobook for The Night She Disappeared, we've got Joanne Froggatt, who was in Downton Abbey. So yeah, we've gone quite sort of A-list with this one, and I've been getting some amazing feedback about her narration. So yeah, it is. I have become much more involved with it, and the publishers themselves have become much more involved with it. Quite often the audio contract would be separate to the publishers because it was so not a big deal. And now publishers are desperately trying to get back the audio rights because there's so much more money in it now. And yeah, the whole thing has just taken off, and it's definitely become something that everybody's much more involved in, including me.
There's a question of somebody who I think has never read your work, but is very intrigued and was wondering if there's a particular place you would recommend starting.
Yes, so I always say the same thing because of the pattern of my writing career, because I started off writing romantic comedies and then sort of moved across into family dramas and mysteries, and then slowly moved into darker areas and thrillers and crime and what have you. And if you're a thriller reader, I always suggest you start with my newest one, if you've not read any of them, and work your way backwards, because there will come a point where if you don't like reading family sagas, or if you don't like reading romantic comedies, you'll hit a book and you'll think, I'm out, don't like this. And then you can stop. But then again, you may not stop. You might think, well, I didn't think I liked family sagas, but this one's really good, so I'm going to read that. And then I didn't think I liked romantic comedies, but actually I don't mind this. So I think, but if you start with the newest one and work backwards, then you can choose your moment to stop reading.
Well, we did say earlier on that all of the books are standalones. So, especially the most recent ones. So you're not giving up anything in terms of.
No, there's no. But I do think that's the best way to do it. Start with the newest, work backwards.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's a reverse journey through your journey as a writer, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes, you'll be able to see the evolution, but in reverse.
Which one had the hoarded out house?
Yes, I love that book. That was called The House We Grew Up In, which was my first sort of successful book in America. That was the one that really kind of it sort of launched me and got my name more widely known in America, was that one. And it's still, when I meet American readers, for a lot of American readers, it's their favorite of my books. and it's one of my favorites as well. So it's about this mother and her 4 children and her husband who live in this chocolate box cottage in this beautiful Cotswolds village, and something traumatic happens to the family one Easter Sunday, and the mother slowly develops obsessive compulsive hoarding disorder and becomes a hoarder, and it's about what happens after she dies and the family having to come back together to clear out the house and all that sort of thing. It's yeah, it's a fun book.
I'm trying to remember, Lisa, what was the book where you first came to us? It was some years ago, and I'm trying to remember.
It must have been Then She Was Gone, because I'm pretty sure. Or was it? No, I Found You. I Found You, I think.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds right. I think you'd been in Canada and then you made your way to
Yes,
Scottsdale.
that's right. Yes. So I think that was the first book that I toured with. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was that one.
The inevitable question a couple of people are asking about, have you given some thought to writing a series, or is that something you're not interested in?
That is something I am not interested in.
There you go.
I just love, I mean, obviously even with a series you can introduce new characters and new settings and new scenarios and what have you, but I just love a fresh slate, a blank screen, nothing in my head. And I'm actually currently writing the sequel to The Family Upstairs, which is something, I've written one sequel before, so this is only the second sequel I've ever written. And it is a very different proposition, because there's that sort of balancing act between writing it for people who haven't read the previous book, so they need a certain level of explanation of what's going on, but then writing it also for people who have read the previous book, who know what was going on and don't necessarily want to go through it all over again. And I'm on a tiny bit of a learning curve with this in terms of what to leave in and what to take out, and that sort of balancing act. But no, generally I like a blank screen and a clean canvas, and
everybody's fair game. Nobody's safe. You're not sure everybody's going to survive to the end of the book, right?
Yeah, well, there's that as well. Absolutely, that's a very good point. And I shall use that in interviews going forwards for reasons why I don't want to write a series, because that's exactly right. There is something, quite sort of dangerous and exciting about the fact that everybody's expendable.
With a series, you know the hero is going to survive to the end of the book.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
It does amp up the danger. But that only really works for authors who like world building. Not everybody, once they've created. I remember somebody asked Louise Penny at an event one time if she's ever going to write anything that wasn't said in 3 pines. And she said, no, I've only had one good idea and I'm going to stick with it.
Right. Okay. Yes.
I'm not saying she doesn't do world building around 3 pines, but I do think that it's quite different, if you want to embrace everything new. I mean, it comes up a lot when you're looking at fantasy, the start of fantasy series and so forth, and the whole world building thing can be pretty daunting if you're creating an entire mythical world. But I've always thought that you really liked that world building aspect and throwing everybody at risk without a safety net. And I remember asking you, I think it was last year, Lisa, who it is you like to read? And I think your reply was books like yours, but am I misremembering that?
No, that's exactly. I like reading books like mine. Yes, that's exactly what I like reading. I read a fantastic book on holiday, The Plot by,
Jean Hanff Korelitz.
Can you say that again? Because
Jean Hanff Korelitz, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And I'm going to give you a recommendation if you liked it. We have a new book. Oh my God,
I loved it.
I did too. I thought it was absolutely amazing. And hilariously, she never thought it was a crime novel. We did a great interview with her last May, and she has been surprised.
I've got to read that book.
It's really, it was our crime book.
I read it in a day. It was extraordinary.
Yeah. But I have a book for you that I would really recommend called The Wonder Test by Michelle Richmond.
Okay.
It's new, and I have recommended it to everybody who liked the plot.
Ah, oh, well, that's a very good recommendation in that case.
I'll email you that.
Thank
but
you.
I really absolutely loved it, and I think it has elements in it that you would find particularly interesting. We did an event with her last week, and she's lovely. As a person, which I thought she would be, because you can sort of tell when you read a book what sort, well, not always. Over the years, we have every once in a while wished we hadn't met a particular author. It just happens
no, that's
occasionally.
really sad. That's awful.
And we even have customers who have said that they are nervous about coming to a particular event because they're worried that if they do, they won't like the author and that will put them off the books. I mean, you know, it is kind of a challenging thing if you think about it.
Yeah, well, this is what publishers do. They throw these people out there into the world and expect them to be good at this sort of thing. And luckily, I find it quite easy and I quite enjoy it. But there's no guarantee that just because you can write a good book that you can be good out there in the world, meeting people and talking to people and, you know, discussing your craft. It's quite a gamble doing that, but that is part of the game.
Not every writer is a lovable person, Lisa.
No, absolutely not. Well, some of them are lovable, but they're just kind of, you know,
introverted.
Introverted, exactly.
Not
naturally public people.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's a different skill set, and I do think that people have been unfortunately, it's more and more required of you as to be a successful writer, thanks to social media and all the rest of it. I think Zoom has helped some authors as well as hindered some. You know, it all depends on your personality. I also think it's a mistake to think that an author should be just thrown up on a screen and expected to carry the entire conversation as a solo act. That's why everything we do is a conversation.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. That was my worst nightmare. If someone says, "I won't be a moderator, you'd just be you talking." No.
Right. Or even worse, reading from your book. What could possibly be more boring than to sit there and watch an author, you know, do that? So anyway, it's always been an absolute delight to talk to you. Patrick, is there anything else from the audience that you'd like to share?
Let's see here. Just a lot of fans weighing in about their favorite books, and there's some fun little conversations going on about where to start.
Lisa can read in the comments field if she wishes to. So Lisa, I forgot to raise a toast. This is your publication day.
Actually, water. Oh, how boring. Cheers.
I know. Everything's BYOB. I should have told you. But congratulations and felicitations on yet another fabulous book and successful book launch. And I can only hope that by next year, you're going to actually be able to come see us again.
Oh, yes, please. That would be amazing.
It really would.
Just keeping everything crossed.
There will be a podcast available maybe by tomorrow. And since Lisa's mentioned the popularity of audiobooks, we've been really surprised to see we've had something like 114,000 podcast downloads from our conversations with authors over the last 500 and whatever Zooms we've done. So I do think the podcast is a wonderful variation. So I will send you the link to the podcast as well as to the video.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it'll be great. And Patrick is reminding us we have a very few signed copies. Again, this is our British Crime Club Book of the Month. And so all those club members got it automatically, but we still have a few for you. So Lisa, enjoy the rest of your evening. I know it's later in London, so you could now go and have a real beverage if you want.
Or a bed.
That would be true also. Great.
Lovely, yeah. Oh, lovely talking to you both. Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Patrick. And thanks to everybody who's been watching. And I'll see you in real life next year.
I certainly hope so. Goodbye, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you again for joining us.